Agnes Thompson's conclusions. Connecting with the American 40-plus reader, cultural nuances and resonances. Doris's story, while universal in its themes of family, betrayal, and resilience, is deeply rooted in an American context, making it particularly resonant for readers aged 40 and above. The narrative leverages specific cultural, historical, and geographical elements that ground her experiences firmly within the familiar landscape of American life. Doris and Harry building their home with their own hands almost half a century ago evokes the classic American ideal of self-sufficiency, hard work, and establishing a lasting legacy. This embodies a foundational aspect of the American dream. David and Linda, however, represent a contemporary perversion of this dream, prioritizing quick money and Wall Street gains over tangible legacy and genuine family connection. Their attempt to seize Doris's home and assets is a direct assault on the physical manifestation of her American dream. This resonates with concerns about changing values and the perceived erosion of traditional American ideals, prompting reflection on what truly constitutes success and legacy in contemporary society, contrasting the old American dream with its modern, often materialistic, distortions. Reflections on legacy, family, and the enduring power of wisdom. Doris's journey is a profound narrative that synthesizes the core themes of generational conflict, the paramount importance of independence, the destructive dangers of greed, and the transformative power of love and forgiveness. Her story transcends a simple family dispute, evolving into a compelling exploration of dignity and self-preservation in the face of betrayal. The narrative's relevance to the 40-plus American reader is deeply embedded in its portrayal of universal anxieties and experiences. From navigating complex family dynamics and the responsibilities of caring for aging parents to contemplating their own legacy and financial security, Doris's struggle mirrors concerns prevalent within this demographic. The profound family crisis, initially fueled by the children's greed and Doris's subsequent determined fight, ultimately serves as a powerful catalyst for transformative change and reconciliation. This extreme situation compels David and Linda to confront their values and the devastating consequences of their actions. Without this crucible of conflict, it is plausible that the children might never have recognized the profound wisdom of their mother or the fundamental misdirection of their own priorities. The final, unexpected twist involving the notary further solidifies this observation, demonstrating how the crisis, paradoxically, protected them from an even larger, unforeseen threat. This perspective suggests that even deeply painful family conflicts, while challenging, can be profoundly redemptive. For the 40-plus audience, it offers a hopeful outlook, implying that even severely strained relationships can find a path toward healing and renewed respect, often through challenging circumstances that necessitate self-reflection and a reevaluation of core values. Doris's ultimate victory was not achieved through modern means or aggressive confrontation, but through timeless virtues, unwavering patience, astute observation, deep-seated knowledge, and an enduring, unconditional love. This reinforces the idea that wisdom gained through a lifetime of experience remains an invaluable asset, often underestimated in a world obsessed with speed and superficiality. Doris embodies a quiet yet formidable strength throughout the narrative. She does not resort to overt aggression, shouting, or emotional outbursts, even when subjected to profound betrayal. Her power emanates from an inner resolve, strategic thinking, and an unwavering, unconditional love for her family. She is portrayed as an old oak that has survived hundreds of storms, symbolizing resilience and deep-rooted endurance. This portrayal elevates the traditional role of a matriarch from a passive or merely nurturing figure to an active, intelligent protector of her family's well-being and legacy. This depiction resonates deeply with the 40-plus audience by offering a powerful and relatable image of strength that is not defined by physical prowess or overt displays of power, but by steadfastness, profound wisdom, and the enduring power of love and family values. It celebrates the often underestimated strength of older women in navigating complex family dynamics and safeguarding their loved ones from both internal and external threats. The story concludes with a hopeful message about the potential for intergenerational understanding and the critical importance of nurturing family bonds and respecting the wisdom of elders. It serves as a powerful reminder that true wealth lies not merely in financial capital, but in the richness of human connection, shared history, and the enduring legacy of love passed down through generations.
Hey, welcome to Agnes Thompson's channel. My name's Doris, and I'm going to share my story with you.
My mornings started the same way for the past 5 years, ever since Harry left. The aroma of ground coffee, which he loved so much, and the smell of freshly baked apple pie, which I made using our old recipe, always filled the house. I'd sit on the porch, gazing at the horizon where the sun slowly rose above the Rocky Mountains. This house, which Harry and I built with our own hands in a suburb of Denver, Colorado, nearly half a century ago, wasn't just a place to live. It was a living thing, soaked in memories. Every creak of the floorboard, every sunbeam that broke through the kitchen window, had a story to tell. My hands, old and wrinkled with cracked skin, remembered thousands of touches to the earth. They were a map of my life, imprinted with all my joys and sorrows. My world is my garden, which stretches across the backyard. I'm not just a gardener. I am a keeper of family traditions passed down to me by my mother. She believed that the earth, the plants, and the old herbs she collected held a power that could heal not only the body, but also the soul. I believe in it, too. I know how to make a healing tea from ordinary thyme for a cold and a soothing blend for sleep from chamomile and mint. I have my own collection. Hundreds of small, neatly labeled jars, each holding a story. The black Krim tomato seeds I got from an old Russian neighbor, the seeds of an heirloom corn that Harry grew as a boy, these weren't just plants. They were stories, lessons, and wisdom. My son, David, is a successful financial consultant at a major Denver company. He's 45, and he runs his life like a business project. His life is an endless series of meetings, calls, numbers, and charts. He visits on weekends, but his mind is always somewhere far away, in the world of Wall Street. His conversations revolve around stocks, investments, risks, and profits. He talks as if I should understand all these complex terms. He never asks me about my life, my garden, or what I'm doing. He just shares his achievements as if that's the only thing that matters. To him, anything that can't be measured in dollars or percentages has no value. My daughter, Linda, owns a trendy boutique downtown. She's 42, and her world is social media, the latest trends, and fast money. She arrives with coffee from a fancy cafe, talks about how progressive it is to live in 2025, and is always on her phone. Her kids, Linda's children, Michael and Emily, live on their smartphones, and I feel a chasm between us that they don't even try to cross. A while back, I made a special herbal tea for everyone, the same one my mother said helped our family survive the Great Depression. It was a little bitter, but it had the taste of history and strength. When I offered it to the kids, they just waved it off, calling it old-fashioned nonsense. The grandkids didn't even look up from their phones. At that moment, my heart ached with hurt. I felt that my legacy, my wisdom, my love, it was all just being ignored. It all started with small things that, at first, I took as normal for my age. A month ago, I couldn't find my glasses, even though I was sure I'd left them on the coffee table. The next day, I couldn't remember the name of my favorite flower, the one Harry and I had grown together. These were minor memory lapses, but the children took them as alarming signs. At first, David started calling more often, asking questions about my bank accounts and medical records. He talked about security and the future, but his words sounded like a veiled interrogation. I felt he was looking for something, trying to find a way in. Linda, on the other hand, started discussing the possibility of me moving to a safer place, as she put it, a retirement home, or as she called it in one of her conversations, a center for active living. I saw that there was no real concern in her eyes. There was something else, something cold and calculating. They started calling me a paranoid grandma when I tried to point out their inattentiveness and detachment. One day, after I supposedly forgot to turn off the stove for a few minutes, which, in truth, was the first time in 50 years, they both showed up. They sat across from me, their faces serious. David pulled out a stack of papers. It was a power of attorney for my finances, drafted so they could gain access to all my assets, including the house, in case of my incapacity. "Mom, this is for your own good," David said, his voice soft but insistent. "To secure your future. You don't want someone taking advantage of your forgetfulness, do you?" I looked at Linda, and she was nodding, supporting her brother. But I saw that their concern was just a mask. I saw not love in their eyes, but greed. They didn't just want to help me. They wanted control, and I understood that. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just hurt, but a cold fear of betrayal. I refused to sign the documents, but the children didn't give up. They started pressuring me, emotionally blackmailing me, and repeating that my behavior was a sign of progressive dementia. I felt like I was losing control of my own life. My house, my garden, my memories, it all seemed to be slipping through my fingers. But I wasn't one to give up. I'm Doris, the woman who outlived Harry, who built this garden myself, and who knows how to survive. I am the one who, in the past, when Harry fell ill, didn't give up or lose hope. I was the one who studied all the medicines to help him. I remembered his words, "Doris, if you don't have proof, you can't prove anything." He was right. In this world, where every step can be used against you, proof is everything. I sat alone in the quiet of my house, and my brain, which my children said was worsening, worked at full capacity. It replayed every detail of their conversation, every lie. I began to remember all the times I had forgotten something. I realized it wasn't my forgetfulness. It was their doing. They were moving my things to create the illusion of my incompetence. And at that moment, I remembered a gift Harry gave me for my 65th birthday, a miniature nanny camera that could be discreetly hidden on a bookshelf. He said it was just in case, so I could keep an eye on the house when I was away. I didn't sleep all night. My head was full of thoughts about how I would use that camera. I realized it would be my weapon. It would be my shield. I wouldn't just prove I was right, I would expose them. It was at that moment that I decided I wouldn't be just a victim. I would be a hunter. And my hunt was about to begin. The next part of the story would reveal everyone's true colors. I had made my decision. I couldn't just give up. I would watch, listen, and gather evidence. In this small, inconspicuous device that Harry had given me for my 65th birthday, I saw my only chance. I found the miniature camera and carefully hid it on the bookshelf, among old, worn-out volumes that I knew the children would never open. It was so small that you could only notice it if you looked closely. I aimed it at the chair where they usually sat during our family meetings. I was ashamed to be doing this to my children, but the fear of losing my independence, my life, was stronger. After all, for me, as for many of my peers in America, losing independence was the biggest fear. I started acting like a real detective. I started a new journal where I carefully recorded my every move, what I cooked, what I read, who I called, what bills I paid. This wasn't for the children, but for myself, to have irrefutable evidence of my normal, full life. I installed an app on my smartphone that recorded my conversations and began to carefully monitor my finances to catch any suspicious transactions. I knew that in this world, where every step can be used against you, proof is everything. I also consulted with my friend Mary, who was a real estate lawyer in another state. She confirmed my suspicions. The power of attorney they offered me was structured to give the children complete control over my assets and was very questionable from an ethical standpoint. Mary explained to me that in Colorado, such documents are often used to protect the elderly, but in the hands of unscrupulous relatives, they can become a tool for theft. Her words only strengthened my resolve. The situation was getting worse. David and Linda started acting more brazenly. They hired a young woman named Jessica as a home assistant, who, as I quickly realized, was their informant. She accidentally found my journal or opened my cabinets to check where I had put important documents. I felt that my every move, every breath, was being controlled. My children, who should have been my support, had become my jailers. I started to pretend that I was actually losing my memory. In one conversation, I accidentally mentioned how hard it had become to manage my affairs and that I might really need help with my finances. The children beamed with joy, not knowing that this was all part of my plan. In a conversation recorded by the hidden camera, the children were discussing how to speed up the process and get me to move to a nursing home. They laughed at my forgetfulness and called me a crazy old lady. I watched the video and anger rose in my soul. This wasn't just a game. It was a war, and they were determined to win. I felt that my home, which had always been my sanctuary, had now become a battlefield. During this time, David began transferring small sums from my account to his. He explained it as investments in her best interests, but I knew it was a lie. My deep experience with budgeting, which I had acquired during my years with Harry, allowed me to easily spot these manipulations. I saw that these transfers weren't investments, but an attempt to steal my money to cover his own financial holes. I knew he had business problems. He had mentioned risky investments and losing a lot of money several times. I realized that my financial security was his lifeline. Linda, meanwhile, kept pressuring me, saying that I had become a burden and that they were very worried. In one conversation, Linda even said, "Mom, we just want you to be safe. You don't want something to happen because of your forgetfulness, do you?" I saw that their concern was just a mask. Behind it hid greed and a desire to control my life. I felt they weren't just trying to take my money, but to destroy my identity, my self-esteem. I was furious. I felt trapped, but my anger became a catalyst. I realized that my silliness and forgetfulness weren't signs of weakness, but an excuse for my children to use me. My inner monologue was full of bitter thoughts about how I, a mother, had raised such children. My wisdom, my love, my knowledge, it had all been cast aside like useless junk. This hurt me deeply, but also strengthened my resolve. I started using my life experience and wisdom. I knew a direct confrontation wouldn't lead to anything. I would play their game. I started to pretend that I was actually losing my memory. In one conversation, I accidentally mentioned how hard it had become to manage my affairs and that I might really need help with my finances. The children beamed with joy, not knowing that this was all part of my plan. I was patient. I waited for the right moment. At one point, when David and Linda were discussing their business on the phone in my living room, I heard a key word, Jack. They were talking about some lawyer and some investment scheme. My brain, which they said was worsening, was working at full capacity. I contacted Mary and sent her a few fragments of the recordings. She was shocked, of course, but her professional instinct took over. She immediately recognized the legal jargon and confirmed that this wasn't just a family squabble, but a planned crime. She was even able to find information about a lawyer named Jack Thompson, who was known in Denver for his questionable deals. As it turned out, he was a partner at one of the firms where David worked. Now I knew that my children weren't just greedy, but naive pawns in someone else's game. I decided I had to catch not only my children, but also this lawyer. Using my forgetfulness, I came up with a plan. I called David and Linda and told them I was ready to sign the documents, but only if we all met together with their lawyer. I said I wanted everything to be proper and legally clean. My children, of course, were happy. They thought it was a victory, but it was just bait. I knew they would bring this lawyer, and then I could get all the necessary evidence. I was sure they would discuss the details of the deal, and I would be able to record it. My old, time-tested methods, patience, observation, once again proved to be much more effective than their modern, fast, and superficial schemes. I was like an old, experienced predator waiting for the prey to walk into its trap. On the day of the meeting, I was very nervous. But I didn't show it. I sat in my living room, as always, knitting. David, Linda, and this lawyer, Jack, arrived. They were confident of their victory. I asked them to make some tea so I could concentrate. I deliberately placed my camera so that it was clearly visible, but also hidden from direct view. Jack, being a professional, immediately noticed it. I saw him glance at the bookshelf and my heart stopped. He walked over to it and picked up a book. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew he might spot the camera. But I was ready. "Jack, what are you looking for?" I asked, and my voice was calmer than ever. "There's nothing interesting there. They are Harry's old books." He smiled and put the book back. "Just wanted to see what your mom was reading," David said. "He always says that people who read books are the most interesting." It was a lie. I saw in his eyes that he was suspicious of something. But my forgetfulness saved me again. He didn't search any further, and I pretended not to have noticed anything. When they left, I immediately checked the recordings. They were full of details. The lawyer, Jack, explained in detail how they would use my money, how they would evade taxes, and how they would get huge money. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a financial pyramid scheme, and my children were only a part of it. I saw that my children weren't the main criminals, but just pawns in someone else's game. I heard them talking about a Jack who was a lawyer and who was helping them. They discussed how he offered them a profitable deal that was supposed to help them earn huge money. I realized my children had been deceived. They thought they were smart, but in reality, they were just tools in the hands of this lawyer. Now that I knew the whole truth, I was ready to show it to them. And it wasn't just a plan. It was a full-blown financial fraud scheme that the children were planning to pull off. But what they didn't know was far more shocking. You won't believe how this ended. Finally, I gathered all the evidence. A folder with printouts, a flash drive with video recordings, copies of bank statements showing suspicious transactions. I spent a sleepless night reviewing all the materials. My heart was breaking with pain, but I knew I couldn't just give up. This was the last, decisive battle, and I wasn't going to lose it. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I invited the whole family over for dinner. The children and grandchildren came, surprised by my call. I cooked them a special dinner, just like in the old days. But unlike in the past, when I tried to share my wisdom with them, this time, I was just silent. After dinner, when they were sitting in the living room, I got up, walked over to the TV, and turned it on. A video shot by the hidden camera appeared on the screen. It showed David and Linda discussing how to make their mother sign the papers as quickly as possible. Linda, laughing, said, "She barely remembers anything anymore, David. She's just a paranoid grandma." Then I showed an email correspondence where the children conspired with the lawyer. A deathly silence fell over the room. David and Linda watched the screen, their faces turning pale. The grandchildren, who had been buried in their phones, looked up, astonished by what they saw. I looked at them. My voice was calm but full of strength. I didn't accuse, I just spoke. I told them how much I loved them, how I tried to pass on my wisdom, my knowledge, my family traditions, but they didn't want to listen. I told them how I felt when I was ignored, when I was called a paranoid grandma. Then I showed them the last file. It wasn't just a plan. It was a full-blown financial fraud scheme that the children were planning to pull off. I explained to them that David had invested his money in a risky deal they learned about through the lawyer. They planned to use my money to quickly get a profit without paying taxes. It was a complex legal scheme that, as Mary had told me, was very dangerous and likely illegal. David was on the verge of bankruptcy. He didn't just want to take my money, he wanted to save himself, and he was ready to do anything for it. But what they didn't know was far more shocking. I told them that they were actually involved in a financial pyramid scheme organized by their lawyer, and that I, without them knowing, had already sent all the collected evidence to the legal department. I didn't just expose my children, I saved them. With Mary's help, I sent all the evidence to the competent authorities, not to put them in jail, but for an investigation to begin and for the lawyer who was deceiving them to be caught. I helped David avoid financial disaster and, as a result, saved my son. And my children finally understood that I wasn't just a paranoid grandma, but a wise and loving mother. I saved not only myself, but also my children, preventing their financial ruin. Their shock was complete and absolute. Linda started to cry, her face red. David tried to justify himself, but the words were stuck in his throat. The notary, a person who should have been impartial, hastily gathered his papers and ran out of the house as if he were being chased by ghosts. A silence fell, heavy as a granite slab. I looked at them, at my children whom I loved more than anything in the world. They looked pathetic, their faces twisted with shame and fear. I knew they expected me to be angry, to yell, to cry. But I was calm, like an old oak tree that had weathered hundreds of storms. I didn't feel anger, only bitterness and deep sadness. "Mom, Linda began, her voice trembling. "Be quiet," I said, and it was the quietest, but firmest thing I had ever said. I turned off the projector. Silence returned to the room. I took out the jewelry box Harry had given me and placed it on the table. I looked at my children, and my gaze was full of pain. "I won't do it," I said, and they looked up in surprise. "I won't show this video. Not because I forgive you, but because I love you, and because I believe you can be better." They looked at me, and in their eyes, there was not only gratitude but also incomprehension. They couldn't believe I wouldn't seek revenge. They couldn't understand that my victory wasn't in exposing them but in saving them. I took out one of the seeds, a seed of a rare tobacco variety that Harry grew for himself. I showed it to them. "This seed," I said, "is a symbol of our past. It's a story of how we loved each other, how we worked together, and how we believed in the future." I didn't just forgive them. I gave them a second chance. I gave them an opportunity to return to themselves, to their family, to their history. David, who had always been so strong and confident, started to cry. He lowered his head and wept like a child. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know what got into me." I walked over to him and hugged him. He was my son, and I loved him. But I knew it would take a long time for us to rebuild our connection. At that moment, when I was at the peak of my triumph, when I felt like the strongest woman in the world, something happened that completely changed our understanding of what had occurred. I heard my phone ring. It was a call from the bank. I picked up the receiver and heard the voice of my friend who worked there. "Eleanor, listen, we have a problem here," she said, and her voice was very nervous. "We received a letter from your children in which they asked to transfer all your money to their account. But since they don't have power of attorney, we can't do it. And we just wanted to warn you." I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked at my children, and they were just as surprised as I was. "What is she talking about?" David asked. I realized that they didn't know about this letter. This was the work of someone else. And then I remembered the notary who was in such a hurry. He wasn't just a witness. He was an accomplice. And he was trying to use the situation to get my money. I realized that my wisdom, my patience, and my faith in my family had saved us from disaster. If I had signed that power of attorney they gave me, they would have lost everything. And if I hadn't exposed their plan, the notary would have taken advantage of it and stolen everything I had. And my children finally understood that I wasn't just a paranoid grandma, but a wise and loving mother. I saved not only myself, but also my children, preventing their financial ruin. The grandchildren, who had seen everything on the screen, were in shock. They finally understood that their grandmother wasn't just an old lady with outdated ideas, but a strong and wise woman. They finally saw that true wisdom isn't in trendy fads, but in life experience and love. The story ends with the restoration of warm connections, the strengthening of family ties, and a renewed respect for the older generation. I was sitting in the garden, watering the flowers. David came up to me. He was dejected, but there was no more greed in his eyes. There was understanding and genuine remorse. He handed me an old, worn-out book about herbs that I had once given him. He asked me to teach him everything I knew. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my wisdom, my legacy, my love, it had all finally found its way home.